Hello.
Hi Nitish.
Hi. Yes, sir. Oh, good. When deciding the topic, like how do you guys select topic, right? Like Gurak, usually I feel like he just keeps sending the topic, or like do you guys follow a
Mm,
syllabus?
yes, you just send me the topic and I just upload.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I looked at the syllabus today and I saw testing, and I thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, he might not have talked about testing until now, so I can take the topic. Hello. If you guys want to chat, I'm up for it.
Hello everyone, good evening.
Hi, Nishant.
Hello. So today Gaurav is on leave, so Nitish will take the session. If you have any question, you can ask to him. He is with us.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, concerns, or just want to chat, you can put chat right now until we start the session. 1 minute, and then I think we should start. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start. But before I start, can everyone hear me? Like, okay? Like, am I audible?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Hey, so today's session, we are going to talk about testing. Can anyone tell me what is a test in programming? Like anyone, literally whatever you know. Anyone? No one?
Isn't it like input that you give the code to see if the code runs or it fails?
Yes. It is. That's why it's called a test, right? We give them fake data or like any actions. We tell our program to perform any action in a testing environment, and it performs those actions. And if those actions are successfully performed, that means like we have passed the test, right? If the output is what we expect, then that is basically a successful test. So basically, today we are going to be talking about test-driven development. So what is a test-driven development? How do we write a test? And then how to test a React application like in a efficient way or like in an effective way using modern tools, right? Do you guys have any idea like what kind of tools are there in testing? Do you guys like can you guys can name any testing frameworks? In general, do you guys have any idea about like uh, any frameworks? Do you guys know there are frameworks? Can you guys name any of the frameworks out there?
Tools can be like
Isn't JUnit?
Selenium.
Yeah, Selenium is a tool. But Selenium is, sorry?
Cucumber, Bamboo, I think.
Yes.
Bamboo, and then for performance testing, you have like Load Runner.
Mhm.
And there would be like a different for regression testing, smoke testing.
Yeah. So there's a vast area in testing, right? But we are going to be only looking into unit testing and integration testing. We're going to talk about integration testing. Basically, integration testing is like you combine multiple units and make it like you integrate it. So, but yeah, that's what we are going to talk about, and we'll look into React testing library because we're learning React, and then we'll look into Jest. Jest is a framework in JavaScript, testing framework, and then we'll also see like how we use Jest, or like is there any alternative to Jest, and similar things. But in context, Selenium, Cypress, they are more like end-to-end testing. That means like we have this environment that also act as a server that like that creates a testing environment and it tests everything, right? How a user behaves in that web app, everything. But like today we are only going to be looking into like general testing. So test-driven development is like where you basically write a test before you write any other code, right? Suppose you are writing a piece of code or you are creating a component. So before you write that component, you write test, right? So why is that important? That is important because we want to know that our application behaves as we expect, right? For example, let's just say you have a function A and B that takes in these two parameters, and it returns A plus B. So how do you know like it actually returns A plus B whenever you give it an input? So to test that, we basically, how do you guys think like we can basically test that this function actually returns A plus B? Testing is nothing more than like another function, right? So that function is going to basically take some data. Let's say A is going to be 1 and B is going to be 2, and the output is going to be 3. So if we get this, our test is successful, right? So it is nothing more than a function. So we'll look into like we'll talk about like Jest, and then we'll go deep dive into the code, right? So in test-driven development, what basically happens is we write the test and we expect that test to fail, right? We expect it to fail, and then we write the code, and then we refactor that test. We write the code that passes that test. For example, if I have a function that takes A and B, I'm going to write a test for it, and then I'm going to write a code for it, right? And then if it doesn't passes the test, I'm going to go and refactor the test or refactor the component, and then I'm going to like move into this circle, right? So that is basically what a test-driven development is. It is basically like keeping in mind about your application behavior, right? Like, so your application needs to behave the way it is expected to. But like, why is it like so important, and like why you should like really test, right? So if you suppose if you have a large web application and one of the feature, for example, there somebody goes and changes, like there's a button. What this button does is it takes you to, for example, a page, right? If someone changes that button and then it takes you to a different page, now it's really hard and difficult to figure out like what happened, right? When you have a large code base. So what a test does is we write a test for this button that is always going to redirect to this. So if it redirects to this, our test is going to fail, and then we are going to know, hey, something is wrong with our code, right? So, and whenever, before we push our code, before we publish our code, before we release our code to the consumer, we always run a test first. That means like we are encountering bug ahead before releasing, right? We are being known about that bug before we ship the product. So that is why like testing is so important. You are not going to write testing every day at work, but like the reason like what you actually should test is basically, for example, you have a very high valuable feature, right? For example, you might have a function that does a certain thing and you expect that function to always do that thing. For example, in this case, A plus B, this function always should return A plus B. So in that case, you are going to write a test for that function, right? So this is more like general lecture, but like I'm going to move into code and then show you how we write test, and then we are going to do like a couple of different things. But like, let's talk about like what is test and what are the things that we are going to be interacting with. And then you also need to be familiar with these terms because these are like generally asked during the interview every single time, right? So when you look into testing, we have these things called test runners, and we have this thing called testing libraries, right? So what are test runners? It is nothing more than like a framework that runs tests for us. For example, when you create a new React project, you go ahead in the browse on the terminal and then you write npx create React app and give your app name. So what is that? That is basically some application running behind, right? That is running the code, that is running that script. So test runner is nothing more than that. Like test runner, when we are going to look into Jest. And with React, Jest comes inbuilt. Okay, it comes integrated with the React. Whenever you create your new React app using create React app, Jest is integrated. So it is recommended and it is integrated as well. And there is another thing called testing library, right? So what is a testing library? So what is a library? Is React a library or a framework? Can anybody tell me, like, is React a library or a framework?
A framework.
I think
React
Library.
React
library.
yes, React is a library, right? It is not a framework. That's why you can integrate React. Like that's why you can write React on the front end, you can write Java on the back end or anything. Like you can integrate React with CSS, SCSS. You can write Chakra UI with React, right? So it is a library. It is not a framework. So we have other libraries. The one library that React provides for testing is React testing library, right? So this is nothing more. What does library does? What does React does? React provides us functions, right? To create a component, to create states, everything is a function. So this library also provides us function, but that is going to help us catch DOM elements and perform actions. So what do I mean by catch DOM elements? For example, you have a button that says submit. Whenever you click this button, it submits a form, right? So this button is a DOM element, right? Document object model. Everything that you see in this browser is a DOM object, DOM element, right? So even this button is a DOM element. So it helps us catch this specific elements and then perform actions on them. For example, I can write a function that says, hey, get me this button. And then whenever I click this button, like expect that it submits the form. And if it submits the form, that means my test is passing, right? If it doesn't submit the form, that means there's something wrong. So those functions are provided by React testing library. Another alternative is Engine, but we're not going to be looking into Engine because we're like mostly concerned about React, right? I mean, we can use Engine in React, but like React testing library comes inbuilt. So we'll be looking into React testing library. Now, this doesn't mean like you just need to use Jest and enzyme. You can use Jest and enzyme, or you can use Mocha and enzyme, or you can use Mocha and React testing library, or you can use Jest and React testing library, right? You can use any combination, but the combination has to be you need one test runner and you need one testing library. We are going to look that into the code, but before that, what does the test runner does? It basically runs script for us. For example, when you start when you start your React project, you write npm run start or npm start. So what is that running? It is running a script, right? So Jest is going to run npm run test, right? That script is run by Jest, right? So that is what Jest looks for. It runs the script. And it also, whenever it runs the script, it looks for a file name that ends with .test. It can be the .ts for TypeScript, or it can be literally anything. But for example, right now if we are writing in JavaScript, it will look for .test, .js files, right? For example, you have a button component. Now you are testing this button component. You are going to write test in another file, right? So it's going to be button.test.js. Then Jest is going to look for this test file. And then it goes to that file and it runs each test you write. And then it gives you a status. Either you have a failed test or you have a pass test. So that is what basically a test runner in a testing library is. We are going to look into code, and then we are going to write our first test. And then like I'll walk through like how everything works and how everything kind of makes sense. So until now, if you have any questions, like you can go ahead and ask me, okay? I'm going to create test demo, and inside of test demo, I'm going to create React app, and let's say our app is going to be testing demo. If you guys want to follow along, you are more than welcome to do that. If you guys have any questions, you are more than welcome to ask. But like whatever we went through just right now, it's more like a theory, a lecture on like just introduction to testing. But like we'll look more into code and we'll understand like what it actually is, or like how it actually performs any functions, or how it catches DOM elements. We'll look more that into it. Okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to open in VS Code. Okay, so we have a basic React application, right? We see like React comes with Jest, right? See, we have app.test.js, and it's already writing this unit test. So what it is doing, we'll come back later and we'll see like what it's actually doing. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So we'll come back later and we'll see like what it is actually doing. But like for now, let's just look at the structure of our application. So it already supports .test.js. That means it comes with Jest. We're gonna look into we are going to look into our package.json file, and then we are going to look into dependencies, right? So what do we have? What are we using? We are already using Jest, right? So Jest is basically a frame. Jest is a library, right? That helps us run our test code, right? So it already comes with Jest, and it also has something called testing library, right? So what is a testing library? It is a testing library, right? That React provides. So testing library / React is the one that React provides. We also call it RTL, or React testing library, and it also provides us with Jest. So Jest is basically a test runner, right? So let's go ahead and run a command and we'll look more in detail. So right now React provides us with some scripts, right? So if you write npm run start, it's going to start your React application. If you write build, it is going to build your application. Now we have another script called React test. So we're going to run that script and we are going to see what is happening, right? So I'm going to run all test, and what it does is it finds this app.test.js file, which is this, and we have a bunch of code here, right? So let's see. Everybody can see properly, right? Do I need to zoom anymore, or is it fine?
That's good. Looks fine.
Okay, cool. So let's see what is happening actually. So it's giving, we have a function called test, right? We have a function called test, and it is giving us some text. It says render learn React link, right? And then we have a callback function, and this function is basically rendering app from app, right? So it is rendering this file, this content. And now it's saying it's a constant, so it's a variable. So we have a link element that is basically what it's doing is it's using bunch of methods that is provided by React testing library, and then it is using that to get learn React, right? Now it kind of makes sense when you look into it. It's saying get by text from the screen that says learn React. So now if you go to app, it is going to say learn React, right? So we have learn React. So what is it testing is your application actually displaying this text? It is testing if your application is actually displaying the text. So now since it's passed, that means like it is there, right? So we give them another function, which is basically expect function, and it is what it does, right? By expect, it means it expects something. So what is it expecting? It is expecting that element which we are grabbing called learn React, and it is expecting to be in the document. Now what is to be in the document? It is a method, right? Now what it does, it checks, is it in your app? Is it in the document? Is it in the DOM? By DOM I mean, is it in the browser? So for example, now if we have npm run start, if we start it, what we're going to get is we are going to get this. Now, is it rendering learn React, right? So now it's passed, right? It is rendering learn React, so it is passed. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to remove this and say run testing, right? Now, what do you guys think? Is it going to pass, or is the test going to pass? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? I'm going to save it, and it is now the test has failed, right? Now the test is saying, okay, you need to render learn React link. Now you are getting an element. It's supposed to be in the document, but it's saying it's not there. That's why it has failed, right? Now, how do we fix that? Now we go to app.js, Now we see like this learn React, let's write learn testing, right? Now if we save, we pass, right? So it is actually looking for that element in the DOM. It is looking for, hey, do we have a button? Hey, do we have this text? Hey, is this shown? Like, is this visible? So like it really makes it easier to like understand like if our feature is actually working, right? It might work on your local server now, like whenever you push it to prod or like whenever you are releasing something. Now, do you expect it to be like be shown to millions of customers, right? So we write test because sometimes there can be something that can break your app. So this is like generally what comes with React, but now we'll go and write our custom component, and then we'll go ahead and write our custom test. But like for now, like did you guys like get a general sense of what is happening, what a test is, and how do we test things? Just in general, very on a very general level, or like just looking at this code, like are you able to identify what is this doing?
This get by text is not looking for any buttons or any input files or anything as such, right? It could be any element, but would just need the content of learn testing.
So by name you say get by text, right? So it means it is
Yes.
looking for a text. So now there is something called RTL cheat sheet. So testing library, you have this cheat sheet, and these are like functions, right? These are so many functions that other people have already written and is available for you on this library, right? From here, it is available for you. So if you go here on this cheat sheet, you have so many. You can find it by get by title. So you can give it a title. For example, you can, let's say you have a title, and then you can use get by title, and you can like get, for example, learn React, and you can actually target this using title, right? Using get by title, right? Or you can get by text, right? You can find elements text content, right? So this is basically a text, right? It is not a button. If it was a button, we wouldn't be saying get by text, right? So it is only looking for that text, right? In this, like it is only looking for the text. There is a link, but it is not looking for the link. It is looking for the text. So this is what this function does. You basically have so many different functions. You can literally target anything, or like you can later what we'll do is we'll write our own ID for the using data test ID, and we'll target it by get by test ID, and so we can test any element we like.
So that means this is if the text learn testing was inside the title, our test would have failed.
Right. So if I do this and I do this, now if I do this, well, I save that. Now it's passing. You know why? Because it is looking in the document. So this document means, is it present on this browser, in this DOM, anywhere, right? So that is to be in the document. So that's why it's passing. But we have other functions. We can say get by title, right? And we have an error. Let's see what's the error is. Get by title and learn testing to be in the document. Let's see what the get by title does, right? Find by title attribute or SPZ title tag. Okay. Get all by title, app.js. Do we need to give it any attribute? I am not sure, but we'll look into like doing it more custom. So currently these are like global function that is going to look like get by text to be in the document. For example, if there was something that you like, for example, let's say whenever you click a button, you want it to be visible. So like we have like something called to be visible, right? So if it is visible, it's going to run that too. Currently title is not visible. We have a title element and we are expecting that element to not be visible. Okay. Yeah, currently it's okay. We'll look more into it. We'll write our own custom component and we'll use something called data ID, data test ID, and then we'll go on from there. Like currently we have other methods like render, screen. By screen it means again the DOM. So like get this text from anywhere in the DOM. And then if I have that text to be visible, that means it is passing, right? So it is visible, right? That's why it's passing, right? So to be, let's say, what else can it be? To be invalid, is it invalid? No, it's not invalid. So that's why it is failing. If it is supposed to be invalid, we would have a passing test, right? So that's how basically we write a test. But now we'll look into like we'll create our own component and we'll try to test it. That way you'll have like more understanding of how testing actually works. Fun fact, I wrote a test today at work. The last time I wrote a test was a few months back, right? So it's not like you don't write test every single day. You write it only when you are needed, only whenever you are writing a high value feature or a function that does certain thing. And if somebody changes it, you want to like protect it, right? You want to be notified that there's a change. This is what it is supposed to do. Then you write the test for it. We are going to delete this app, everything from this app. Let's see. And we are going to create a component folder. We are going to change this React script test to npm run test. That's fine. It's the same thing. You can write npm run test. It will still run this test. But here on this component, we are going to have a component. We are going to create a counter, right? And then we are going to write test for it. We are going to tell it to increase, decrease, like is it visible? And then we are going to write a test for it. So here, let's write a basic counter function. Counter return something, and then I'm going to export it. And then I'm going to import it here. Counter. Okay, now there is nothing, so I'm going to give it a div. Okay, so can anyone tell me what do we need to build a counter, like a basic counter? What are the things that we need? Anyone?
Initial value and step.
Right, we are to count it. We need a button, right? We need an increase button. We need a decrease button, and we need something to display that value, right? And then that value is going to be, we are going to initialize it using use state hook, right? So let's say we have a counter, and then we have set counter, and then we are going to use state hook. Initially, it's going to be 0. Let's say initially it's going to be a 0. Now we are going to have a button, and that says what it does is it's going to add, and then we are going to give it a paragraph, and that is going to display what's the value that we have. And then we are going to have another button, and it's going to decrease it, right? Pretty simple, right? So if we click it, we want it to increase it. If we click it, we want to decrease it. And then at the end of the day, we want to test our application. So can anybody tell me how would we want to increase it? Like, what do we need to do in our code base, like in order to increase the value of it? Currently, we have our counter as 0, right? So what do we need to make it 1?
We can create like one increment function to do counter +1.
That's cool.
Which returns counter +1.
Okay. And how would you, let's say, increment function, right? I'm going to write arrow function, and you says it returns counter +1.
Yes. So actually, we do it in set counter.
Okay, nice. Yeah. We basically use set counter and we update the value, right? So here I'm going to use a callback function that is going to say my previous value is going to be previous value +1, right? Currently it's counter, right? So I'm basically using a callback function that's going to take in previous value, and then it's going to update that previous value by 1, right? And now here on button, we have a function called onClick. Here I can say increment and increment function, right? So what happens here now, if we click it, it's going to take that previous value and then it's going to update it, right? And same for decrement, right? And what do we do here? Anyone?
Same thing like -1.
Yes. We take previous value and then previous -1. And then we again assign that to an onClick function, and then we say decrement, right? So now it's working, right? We have a counter app, right? Now we want to test it. So how do we test it? The first thing we want to do is we want to create a file, counter.test.js. That means it is going to be identified when we run npm run test, right? And here, how do we want to grab these elements? We want to grab this button, and then we want to perform an action on that button, and we want to check if that counter is being updated, right? So there are 3 different things, right? So this is something called that I told you earlier about data test ID. We give this data test ID. It can be anything. It can be any string. We use this so that our testing framework, our testing library, for example, Jest, can identify, okay, hey, this is the ID that is used for testing, right? So for here, we can give anything. For example, let's say add, and then we give the similar thing here, test ID, and we give it as a minus. It can be anything, okay? It's just an ID, like a div, right? Like a class name. It's like a class name. And the paragraph, we're gonna give it to data test ID, and we can tell it as a counter or a display, anything. Display, right? It is going to display. So we are going to be targeting this button. We are going to be targeting this, and we're going to be targeting this, and then we are going to write a test for it. Moving on to the test, right? What do we need in order to test this component? What do we need initially? What do we need? Anyone? We need that component, right? We need that component, right? To test that component, right? If we want to test it, we need that component. So now when you write a test, we basically write a function. It can be a test, or it can also be say it, right? It's the same thing, either it or test. This is called a unit test. They are going to be targeting one simple test case. You might see something like describe. Now we use describe for integration testing, or if you have more than one test cases, right? Just general, like more than one or a unit, because we are just testing this one unit of an application. We are going to be writing, let's say test, right? So first thing is going to be very descriptive, right? It's going to ask us for a name that has to be a string, and we need to give it as a callback function that is a just callback function. So if you basically see a syntax here, you can give it as a timeout, but we don't need a timeout. We'll just basically pass a string and a function. So what do we want here is we want to, let's say, increase the counter by 1. Let's say if we click it, we want to increase the counter by 1. So now we need, it also takes a callback function. So I'm just going to write a function. This is a callback function. So now in testing React library, we have a function called render, right? In React, we have this function called render, but also in React testing library, we have this function called render. I'm going to take that and I'm going to render that component. That means I'm basically using this component and I'm rendering that on my virtual DOM, right? React uses virtual DOM. You all guys know that, right? What is a virtual DOM? Can anybody answer me what is a virtual DOM?
Yes, it's not a real DOM, but like it constructs this like DOM at the back of it.
Yeah, like technically it's creating a replica of this DOM, right? DOM means your browser, like this tab, right? This, whatever you see within your application, this is a DOM, right? So virtual DOM is what React uses to compare it to real DOM and only update the things that you need, right? So this is one of another like very important interview question that everyone like always asks, what is the difference between a real DOM and a virtual DOM, and like how does like a React works in terms of like this virtual DOM and why it makes it faster, right? So it is going to render this counter function on its virtual DOM, right? So now whenever we give them an ID, now we want to target this, right? We said we want to increase the counter by 1. That means we want to target this button that has an ID of add, right? And now this is not any regular ID, this is a data test ID. So this is very unique, right? So I'm going to get that ID and then I'm going to let's say I'm going to make changes here. So first I'll grab this ID. So that has an ID of display. So I'm going to say I'll give it a name of counter display, and then I'm going to use another method or another function that is provided by React testing library called screen. So what it does is it gives React or the testing framework access to the DOM, right, to the screen. And I'm going to get by test ID. This is another function that grabs the component by this test ID. So I'm going to give that test ID as add because I have that button, this plus button, I have it as a test ID of add, right? So this is the ID that I have. And also I need this increment function, right? Increment button, right? Not a function, increment button. So I'm going to grab it the same way. Now I'm going to say increment button, and then I'm going to grab it from the screen. And it is going to be also, we are also going to be grabbing it by get by test ID. Now this ID name is add, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, a display has test ID of display. So this would be display and the button has a test ID of add. So I have those two components, like I have the paragraph and I have this button component and I have stored it in a constant, right? Counter display and increment button. Now we have another function. Remember, right? React testing library is nothing but bunch of functions, right? It gives you access to the function. And Jest or enzyme, like those are nothing but they give you access to running the test, right? Those are test runners. So I have this another function called fire event. Now by name, what it does is it fires an event. So what is an event? Event is any action performed on the browser, right? For example, if I press this button, that's an event. Now, because of that button, when I press that button, that event was fired and it increased. Now I click minus, the event was fired and now it's decreased, right? So fire event is another function. It basically does is it fires an event. Now, what kind of event do we want to fire? We want to fire a click event, right? There are different kinds of event, right? Whenever you are writing anything on a form, if you're writing on an input form, it can be an on-change event. whenever you are submitting a button, it can be a click event. So we are going to be targeting a click event, right? See, we also have double click. Everything is provided by the browser, right? Can play, if you have can play through, we have like volume change, like everything is accessible by this library. So we have this function fire event, and we are firing in click event. And whenever which event am I firing? I'm firing an increment button event, right? I'm clicking on increment button. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm firing a click event to an increment button that I got through this ID, right? That I've given this an ID of this. Now what it does is it fires an event. So it comes here, it is going to look for an event. It sees an on click event. Now it has already fired a click event. Now what does click event does? It increases, it runs this function, right? So now we have this. Now if we see here, we have something called expect, right? That is what we expect at the end of our code, right? At the end of our testing, what do we expect? We have already performed our action. We have clicked on an increment button. That is the only action that we wanted to test. Now, once we click it, what do we expect? We expect this to increase, right? So we expect our counter display, which is the paragraph, right? This, whatever it's displaying, we are giving it a display ID, and we are grabbing that by display ID. We want this counter display, and it is a text, right? It is nothing more than a text, right? It is inside a paragraph. It's a text, right? So it is a text. So I want, this is a text content, and I want it to be, initially it's 0, right? I have a state of 0. Now, if you see it here, we have already clicked it. But whenever we are testing, we want to make sure we know the initial state. Initially, it's 0. Now, whenever I click it one time, whenever I click one time, I want it to be 1, right? It has to be 1. Whenever I click it once, it has to be 1. So now there's a test. We wrote a test for an increment event, and then we are going to run our test. I'm going to delete this test, so it is not going to run that test. And when I run this test, it is going to tell me to run our test. I'll run our test, and it says failed. Let's see what has failed.
And just what is that increment button again? Was it actually named the increment button in the counter.js?
This one?
Oh, that's actually the screen object that we.
Yes, we are getting it by add, right? So add is a test ID, right? It is an ID for the button that does increase, right? That increases. So I'm giving it an add, and then I'm firing an event on that. I'm firing an event on that ID, right? On the component that has that ID. So this button has that ID. So I'm firing an on-click event. I'm clicking it. Basically, I'm not actually clicking it, but I'm telling Jest to like click it, right? So that is a function. It like simulates, right? And it clicks that button, and then whatever output is, whatever we expect the display, which is a paragraph, right? This is where actually the counter is. We expect that to increase, right? Obviously, whenever we click it, we expect that to increase. So initially it's 0. Now we want to increase it by 1, right? So what happened? Let's see. Why is it failing? Test to be 1. Okay. This is what test runner does. This is what Jest does. So you see, we are expecting 1, right? But it is giving us 1 on a string, right? Because it is a string. Now, if we run it, we have it as pass. So it is basically grabbing this as a string. Everything is a string. Like whenever you pass an ID here, it's a string. Now this counter is also a string. In HTML, a paragraph is a string. So when we passed it as 1, we have not specified that it has to be a number. We write it 1. It's looking for a string, so it's failing. But hey, like it's a string. It also gives you the code runner, the Jest. It also gives you, hey, I'm expecting 1, but I'm receiving quotation 1, right? and then it is also going to tell you like, hey, this is the description of the test, right? I want to increase the counter by 1. And then I expected, but I received that from my expectation from this counter displayed or text content. I have received it to be an expected, right? So what did I receive? So this received means this received. I received 1 quotation 1, but I expected it to be number 1, right? So it's like it's JavaScript thing. It has to be a string. So if it is a number, we need to specify that it is a number. So that is that. Do you guys have any questions on this? I know a bunch of things. We use so many functions. We didn't create our own function. We use them, and they are provided by testing library. We have like fire event that basically fires an event. We have render that renders the component on our virtual DOM. And then we have screen that basically helps us grab anything from the screen. Now, whenever we use screen, we have so many different methods, right? From this cheat sheet, so many different methods. We can use any method whenever we use screen. So screen gives us access to these methods. Do you have any questions on this? We are also going to write another test for decrement. But like, if you guys have any questions on this, feel free to ask. Are you guys kind of clear on like, okay, how do we write test?
So Nijis, there is no difference in between using it and Jest, right?
Yes. So if I write it at it and I save it, it's still going to run this test, right? Nothing. So test and those are basically test and it are basically smallest unit, right? Smallest unit. That's why we call it unit test, right? They do the same thing. Like, it's just the preference. Do you want to write it? Do you want to say, hey, like like we want to say test. Whenever we write it, we basically write it, and then we write should increase. Like, we just basically try to make it more like communicative, right? Like, we want to match the wording. It should increase the counter by 1, right? So that's how we write test. That's how I write test at my work. Like, everybody write it that way. It should increase the counter by 1. Most of the time, people will be like test, and then they will write the components or like anything. It's just descriptive. It's personal choice, whatever you want to use. It does the same thing. So now, for example, if you have too many or if you have too many tests, you can put it inside another function called describe, right? So describe, we have called describe. We can put it under describe if we have another function. So we are going to write another. I'm going to write one in. We wrote it on it, and then we are going to write another with test, and then we are going to wrap it around describe. And we'll see, like, this is still fine. You can mix and match. You can do, like, you can use however you want, right? So can anyone tell me, like, just tell me what should I do in order to test the decrement button, right? Similar pattern, like almost similar. Anyone can walk me through? I'm going to write a test, write a prompt. It should decrease the counter by 1, right? Because I'm clicking it 1 time and it takes a callback function. Now what should I do?
Render the counter.
Right. Now this render is specific to this function, right? So it is not coming it is not outside of that function. That's why we need to again render that component. Counter. And what else should we do?
Declare.
Now, what do we need? Do we need this paragraph? Yes, right?
Yes.
So we are going to take that again. Let's say we are going to take counter display screen.get by test ID, and we still have that ID as display, right? And then now we are going to need the decrement button, right? Decrement button. And now we are going to grab that from the screen. And we are going to grab that by test ID. But now our test ID is minus, right? For the decrement button, we are going to write minus. That means we are targeting this button minus. And what else do we do now? Now we have that two component. What's the next step? Anyone? Yes, we want to make a simulated click, right? We want to have a click. So we are going to fire an event of a click, and then we are going to click the decrement button. And then we are going to expect the counter display, which is our output, the display. And then it is a text content, right? It is text content. And then we expect it to decrease by 1, right? So if it is 0, initially it's 0. Now we want to expect it to be -1. It is a string, right? It is a text, right? It is a string because it is a text. That's why it's. Now, if we run this test, we have like 2 tests that has passed. We have should increase the counter by 1, passed. Should decrease the counter by 1, passed. Now, if we say it should be -2, we are going to get a fail because it went to this test, it ran through that test, it passed this test. Now it goes to this test function, and then it says, hey, the test is failing on this function, right? I expected -1, -2, yeah, because we are giving it here, right? We are expecting -2, but I actually got -1, so that's why the test is failing, right? So what it does is whenever you have a large scale application, whenever you are writing a function, whenever you are writing a utility function, for example, I wrote this utility function that basically takes in an array of data and then finds if any of those is premium. If it is premium, if it is premium, it returns true. If it is not premium, it returns false. So I need to write tests for it. So like I'm basically testing few different things. I need to test if those are utility function. If I'm writing a function that are utility function, you guys know what is a utility function, right? A function that basically provides utility, right? It provides us to do some action. For example, function a comma b, and then I say return a plus b. So this is going to be a utility function, right? Because whenever I need the addition of 2 numbers, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this function, right? I'm going to say sum of 1 and 2, right? So now this function is a utility function. So if you're writing something like this, you need a test. You write a test for it, right? Okay. Now we have 2 different tests. Now what we're going to do is we are going to combine it into one single test, and we are going to use something called describe. And describe is again the same thing. It takes a string and it takes a callback function, right? It takes a string and it takes a callback function. Now everything else, multiple test cases are inside of that function, right? So let's say we are testing counter component. So what we are doing here is, now if we see our testing result, we are testing counter component, and it has a this is like a title, let's say like a title, and then inside of each title you have different tasks, right? Suppose you are testing multiple components, you are testing like 10-20 components. You need to know which component you are testing. So what describe does is it basically groups it is grouping this it and test. So it is grouping these 2 testing functions into one, and it's saying testing counter component. That's it. Like it does nothing else. It is only a way to group these 2 components. If we have multiple components, we basically put it inside of a describe function that takes in a string that has a callback function, and then inside of a callback function we write our test case. In test case, it takes a string again, it takes a callback function, and then we write our test inside of that callback function. Do you guys have any confusion on this?
I have a few questions. There are some terminologies that you have used, some from the Jest library, right? Like in get by test ID.
So I'm going to this describe, test. These are from Jest.
Okay.
Describe, test, expect. These are from Jest, right? When you hover it, it says Jest, right? It is coming from Jest. Okay. When you go to get by test ID, it is a method, and these methods are provided by the React testing library.
Okay.
These are, yeah, React testing library is nothing. It is same as hooks, right? For example, here we imported a use state, right, from React, right? Yeah. React provides this function. Same way, this library provides us with these functions, right? We are just using function. We are not writing our own function because somebody else has already written that function for us.
Yeah, and how do we figure out like which term to use? Like get by ID, test by ID. There's one term for like if you have to test text, you use that one. And if there is a title, do you consider it as a text or do you consider it as a
so that's why we have like documentation from testing library, right? Testinglibrary.com. It has a documentation that provides us with literally everything, right? Whatever you want to use, right? Like it provides us with everything. The other thing, the way you can do is like in VS Code, whenever you get, for example, I'm writing this and whatever screen is providing, you can check like all of those functions are again accessible here right now. Like in order to like know which one to use, you basically have to go and look into documentation, right? So you need a in this case, get by test ID means it always gets through a test ID, right? So like if you want to target anything, use anything that is XML, right? Which is like JSX or HTML, anything that is HTML or JSX. If you give this an ID, you can always target it by this ID. For example, even if it's a button, right? We performed an action on it, but we got that button from the ID, right? Everything. Because in React, everything compiles down to HTML, right? At the end of the day, everything is an HTML. So everything that you do, any element that you create is going to be a HTML element, and you can target that here, right? You are not going to target the function because you are going to write function outside or inside anywhere, right? This function is going to be your own function, but you are basically testing that function using that ID by targeting that element.
Okay. Yeah. And once you're done with the like, which component do you create this test? Test in which is it? Do you I don't know, is it app.js? Where did you write your test case? Is it
So whenever you create a component, there are multiple ways people do that, right? There is something called TDD, which is domain-driven development, and another thing is called TDD, which is test-driven development. So in test-driven development, what happens is whenever you create a component and you are testing for it, you write it inside a same folder, right? So it's easier whenever you have a test file, you are importing that component, right? It's in the same folder, so it is easier for you to like, hey, this, for example, here I'm running this and then I'm running a counter component. For example, here are hundreds of components, then I know where to look, right? I know, okay, hey, this is here inside of counter, so I write counter here. In domain-driven development, the another thing that we can do is we can have another folder inside of source called test, right? Test. This is just the way people write this and test, and people write like we can put the same counter test here, right? But now all we need to do is we need to update the input. But it's the same thing. Sometimes people write all of their test case in one file just to separate, hey, these are my test and this is my component. Or sometimes people write it like inside of the same folder so that this component is related to this test. So however you want to approach it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
It is. Did you say if we put all the test files in the test folder, it would be the concept of the DDD?
Kind of, but it's again, it's your preference, right? By domain-driven development, it's going to be like instead of component, I might have general component, I might have modules, I might have some edge cases, some components that is going to cover some edge cases. So I'm going to separate it on different domains, right? So for example, I might have modules, right? Modules can have components, right? Now I can also have general, which is shared across the code base, and the general folder also can have components, right? See, now we have multiple components in multiple area, but we are separating it by domain. By what do I mean by domain? Like modules, general. For example, currently, if I inside of a source, if I have general, by general I mean like something that I'm going to reuse everywhere, right? So those components are going to be inside general, right? For example, let's say time or date, any function that catches your time or anything, or you can have another folder called utils, right? That is going to have only utility functions, right? That is domain driven, right? I'm not going to have a component and I'm not going to have a utility function inside of the same folder. So that is not domain driven, right? So domain driven is like they are separating everything into a particular domain and putting all of the files into that domain.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, I use domain driven at work. So like, but also we also like kind of write tests sometime. So it's all about preference, right? What your company is doing, or like how would you like to write test? You can write it inside of a same folder where you are writing a component. You can put it in one test folder. If this test is going to be testing the whole application, that can be inside of a global test folder, right? Or if it is testing a single component, it can be inside of that component. So it's the same thing. It's all based on preference.
Penny, this one quick question. At my work, like I've also heard a term called BDD, like a board-driven development. Do you know anything what that does? Like what's the difference between BDD and TDD compared to
not I think that's more like behavior-driven development, right?
Yeah, they
I
call
think
it
that's
driven development. I think
I'm not
heard this term a lot, so I was just
yeah, I'm not sure, but they might have something, right? For example, like domain driven, they separated into certain domains. Now, for example, if it is a behavior driven, it can be based on some user behavior. For example, a credit card company might have something called a checkout, right? Checkout folder. Everything that is related to transaction can be inside of transaction folder, or like something similar to that. But I would say like something similar to that. But I'm not sure. I didn't hear about BDD. Mostly TDD and DDD are mostly applied by most companies. Like TDD, you hear that everywhere, right? Test-driven development. Whatever you build, you write a test for it. That is TDD. BDD is like you create everything into a domain, but it's the same file. It's just how you structure those files. So it's basically just a structure.
thanks.
If you have any questions, otherwise we are going to create one more component, but this time we are going to look into form. We are going to look into labels, and then we are going to target that form, and then we are going to fire some events. For example, hey, write into this event, and then like once you write into that event, what do I expect? I expect anything that's written on that label to be there, right? Generally, or in a form, right? So that's what we're going to do. But like you guys have a general idea of how we are writing test, how to actually target the element using test ID, and then how we can grab that element, right, using get by test ID. And once we grab that element, we can fire an event on that element, and then we can expect something to get returned. So that is basically test. You don't write it every single day. Even if you go to work, you are not supposed, or like you don't have to write it every day. You only write it on very important functions. For example, you might have a function that does transaction, right? Credit card processing, maybe. Now that is very important, right? You don't want to have any bugs in it, or you always want to be sure that it's functioning properly. So you write test for it. Okay, cool. Let's look into form. This was basically just nothing more, right? If we inspect, we don't have anything else other than a div, a button, and a paragraph. That's it, right? But we are targeting everything by data test ID. If you go into any website that uses test-driven development, and then you inspect, you are going to see so many data test ID. And then whenever you see that data test ID, you are going to know that, hey, they are like writing test for it. I think one of them was tied. Let me check real quick. I thought so, but container class, class area label. No. Oh, I thought they used it. But basically, whenever you visit a website and if you see data test ID on their HTML, that means they are writing test for it. They don't write it anywhere. They only write it on very important functions or functionality. Okay. Yes.
Is there any way that we can inspect the virtual DOM?
To inspect a virtual DOM?
Yes, because we just initialized the counter component, right? But it's not something that we can inspect from the browser, right?
Right.
In the test library.
Yeah. I think we had something called, let's see, a component tree, general highlights. We have highlights. Yeah, it highlights theme, let's say dark, and let's render, right? Not targeting on that one. 1 second. Okay, see, it's only showing this on these components, right? It's re-rendering. We had something called, I am quite confused. Where was it? I think it's an application. No, we had something called virtualization technology, which is going to flask whenever the component rendered. This is from profiler settings. Okay, I think it is here. Experiments, no. We had something like that. Give me a second. Let's see. Plus render. I think inside of performance, maybe. Yes, I think it is probably. No, performance. This performance. Okay. It's not running. 1 second. 1000. Expect performance settings. Oh, these are just network. We had something called flash, like a flashing I don't remember it exactly. I didn't use it. It was something called component flashing. Yeah, something like that. I don't remember it exactly. It's not in Lighthouse. Lighthouse is for analyzing page. Yeah, I don't remember. But there is you can basically look into like which component renders, and then it is going to flash. There is something like that. Background fringe. Yeah, there is something like that. I don't remember it. Let's see, rendering. Yes, here it is. It's inside of more tools. You have rendering, and then you can do paint flashing. You can turn it on. Now, whenever you render it, it is going to flash, right? Okay, this component is going to target that component, right? So whenever you have like a big project, like you have so many different components, so it renders, it flashes on whichever component that re-renders. Right now it's re-rendering everything, right? So that's why it's flashing everything. It's re-rendering everything. So this is called paint flashing. It says highlights areas of the page that needs to be repainted or re-rendered. Repainted means re-rendered. So it is inside application. You go here and then you go to more tools and then you have rendering. Okay, cool. Let's go and build our form component. And this is going to be form.js. And then we are also going to be writing the test for it. So, and let's say we are going to have a sign-up form. And I'm going to create a dummy component for now. And it is going to return a fragment. I'm going to import that on app.js. I'm going to sign up form. Okay. I need to export it. To here, and I sign up form.
Sorry, what is HR?
I'll show you. One sec.
Okay.
It is
And
nothing
it
but a
is
line. I just wanted to differentiate.
is it allowed for us to like name give a different name to the component than the file name?
Different name. So you said component name in the file name?
Yes, because the component is form. The
Oh
component
yeah,
name.
yeah. You can. That's up to you. Like it's personal choice. You can write anything. You can give them anything. Let's just say sign up.
No, I didn't mean it to the folder, but to the JS file itself. You have named it form, right?
Yeah. That's fine. It can be like you can do sign up form. Same thing. It's just you just have to look into the import. The import needs to be relevant.
Sorry.
Counter sign up form. Sign up form. Is line 18 not defined? Import sign up form from components. Sign up form. Why is it? No. Component. Inside of component, I have sign up. Inside of sign up, I have sign up form. Sign up form. So HR is nothing but it's just a horizontal line. I just wanted to differentiate. Hey, this was something we worked on earlier. Now this is something that we're gonna work on here. So HR is nothing. It's just a horizontal line, divider. Okay. So for form, I'm going to create a basic form, right? So this is going to be a form HTML element. I'm going to have a label, and the label is going to be name. And I'm going to give it an input. I'm going to give it inside of the label. And this is going to input. Type it with text. For now, I'll just give it the type of text. and I have a name, and I have an input label. I also want another label called email, and then I'm going to have an input. Type is going to be email. And I want another label. And this label is going to be password. And it is going to be again input. And the type is going to be password. Okay, so I'm going to style it. I'm going to say display flex. Okay, 1 second. Flex direction would be comments. Okay. Okay, so we have name, email, and password, basic form. So can anybody tell me what are we going to use to initialize the name, email, and password inputs?
The placeholder?
Yeah, like placeholder is something that is going to be here, right? For example, here, if we have placeholder, and we can say enter your name, it is just going to be that, right? But initially we want to set a state, right? Let's say we have a name, and we want to use state. And then initially we want it to be empty, right? Initially. And this name is going to be the input value, right? Value of an input is going to be initial, right? For name. So it's empty. Similarly, we want to have email, and we want to have that email. Email is also going to be empty, and we want to have password and set password. It is same as initializing a variable, right? You guys are very familiar with use state and use effect by now, right? Like you should be like very familiar, like it's like basic bread and butter of React. So okay, so I have let's see. Okay, I'm going to format it. Okay. Now I have an email. I want to give it a value of email. And then I have a password. I want to give it a value of password. Right? So now initially everything is empty. We have this form, but we also want to, whenever we write it here, right now I'm trying to type, but there is nothing because it's this, we are not setting anything. Now I'll have a bunch of functions to change or to set name, email, and password. But I'll ask any of you guys to just tell me what to do next. So currently I'm writing a handle name change function. And a function, and then we need handle email change, because whenever we type it, we want to be able to set that, right? So we already have an initial state. We need to update it whenever we type it. So we are going to have that function. So handle password change. It can be anything, right? Name of the function doesn't have to be handle, but can anybody tell me like how should I update my name? Anyone? I want to update my name. This is basic that you guys did. You guys did.
So can that function receive like an event
Yes.
And then like
Yes,
taking the callback function
right.
takes an event.
Right. Okay.
And then event and then target event.target on change, is it?
Okay.
Or on click?
Right. But for now, we just want to update name, right? So we are
Right.
going to call
Oh,
this
set name. Yeah.
getter, right? And then inside of an event, we have
We take in the
something
value.
called target, right? And that target has a value. Now, if some of you might have been confused, I'm going to log event, and we are going to see what that event is. Right now, there is no event. We are not assigning any event to it, but we are going to assign this event, and then it's going to display here, and then we're going to see. On here, we have something called on change, and then we are going to give it a handle name change. So that is the function that we're passing. Whenever we type anything, that means the state is changing. That means it is going to update that state. So I'm going to save it. Now, whenever I type A, see, whenever I wrote an A, now it is firing an event. So now event has so many different property. One of them is target, right? The target property has something called value, and this is the value that we just wrote, right? That's why I'm targeting that event or target dot value. That's why I'm targeting that value, whatever I write. So if you go into any forms, any website, any form, they are targeting that value through an event using event.target.value. Okay. Anyone else for email? For the email, same way, right? It takes an event because we are currently writing something here. That means it's going to be an event. Event has a target, and the target is going to hold that value. Set email event.target. So now this doesn't have to be named event. It can be E or anything you want, but it is basically a callback function. So here I'm also going to pass an event. I'm going to set password to event.target.values. Now what happens is whenever I now I can't type anything here because I have not assigned it, because I have an input field, 3 input field. One is assigned with an on change event. I want to assign it here too, on change, and the email change, and I want to assign it to a password as well. So on change and the password change, right? So now once I've assigned it, I can type it here, right? I can type anything here. So we have the form, we have everything that we need. Yeah, we have everything that we need. Now we are going to write a test. And the test is going to be, if I write something here, it needs to hold the same value, whatever I write in here, right? For example, if I write here my name, it needs to be my name, right? So that is what I'm going to check. That is what we are going to write test for. Okay. Okay. So now we go to, now if you remember here, we are not going to be targeting by test ID. We are going to be targeting by label, because for a form, all we are using is label, everything is a label, right? The name is a label, email is a label, password is a label. So we're going to be targeting it by label. What is the first thing that we do? We import the component, right? Now, once we import the component, what is the first thing that we do? Anyone, based on whatever we did last time? Here, what did we do? We described what our test is going to be about, or which component is it going to be about, right? So we're going to describe, we're going to give it a string. Let's say sign a form component, and it is going to take a callback function. Everything will be inside of this callback function. Okay, now I want you guys to help me out. What I should do next whenever I write a test, whenever I write a unit test. What we should do?
V1.
Right? We need to specify what the test is about, right? For example, it or test, we need to specify. And the test is about to check, or like we can also say it should allow users to enter their name, email, and password, right? And this is also going to take a callback function. So this is one individual test. If we want multiple tests, we again write it, and then we again write our unit test, right? So this is a unit. This is one test, one small test. So now we are going to be using the React library function, and we are going to be grabbing some of the functions from there. So we have something called, no, initially we want to just render the function, right? We want to render the function, correct? Sign up. We want to render the form, right? We want to render the component like we did here. Like we did here. If we look here, we are rendering that component, and then we are doing anything that we need. So once we have rendered it, now we want to grab the elements, right? Now we want to grab the elements. So first I'm going to grab name, right? Name input. Now, again, there is another function that helps us grab this element, which is called, we used it earlier. Any of you remember? The function is from React testing library, and it helps us grab any elements from the screen. It is called screen, right?
Right.
It is called screen. So we need to import from here as well. So from here, we have something called get by label text, right? Again, here, if we see get by label text, find by label or aria label text content, right? Get by label text, find by label. Now in our code base, if we see a form component, everything has a label, right? Everything has a label. So this label, what is the label going to be? Our label is going to be name, right? And it is going to include semicolon as well, because this is our label, right? Anything that's a label. So that is going to grab this name input, this input by its label. So similarly, let's grab email input, and then let's grab password input. Can anyone tell me what should I do? Screen dot. Again, I'm going to get it by label. And then this is going to be email semicolon, because it's a label, right? This everything is a label. And then again, screen dot get by. I could have used the same thing as before. I could have given them the ID. I could have done that, and the ID has to be unique. I give ID for email. I can give ID for name, and then I can grab that by ID, by test ID. But it is going to be more number of code, right? I have to write more. So there are so many functions. You guys like just need to like look into documentation and just figure it out, right? If you want to find by text, by display value, by alt text, which is an alternate, we give it to an image. Image always has an alternate attribute. By title, by role, by test ID. So right now we are getting it by label text. So this is the label because we are using a form. Now we are going to fire an event. Can anybody help me write a fire event function? Anyone? Fire event, right? And it comes from React testing library, right? We want to, now what it does is it fires an event, right? Here we saw that these are event, right? What is an event? These are the event. Anything that we type here, it's an event. Anything that we click here, that's an event. Any action that we perform on the browser is an event. right? So before we fired a click event because it was a button. Now it's an input label. Now we want to fire an on change event, right? Because we are changing that data, right? We want to fire an on change event. In form, you see we have an on change event, right? We have this attribute called on change. So we want to get the on change event, and it is called change, right? Before we had click, right? Now we have change. Now here, what are we going to change? Whenever we had a click fire event dot click, we knew we had a button that had a component. For example, this button had a component, and we are getting it by ID, and then we place that button inside of this, right? And then it was clicking, it was firing that event. Now here, what do we want to target? We want to target name input, right? Name input, right? Now name input is just a label. Name input is just a label, but we want to target the input. We want to target here. We don't want to target the label, but we want to target here. So what this label has, it has a target, right? It's an event, right? We are firing in change event. That means we need to target an event. We need to target event or target dot value. So what is that? We have a target, and the target has a value, right? And the value is going to be anything. Let's say React, right? Now, how did I get this? How do I know it's an object? Simple, right? How do I know it? If I control log an event, if I log an event, if I write anything, I know that the event has, this is the label, this is the event. Event has a target, and it's an object. Target also has value, and it is an object. And that's why, like, I'm targeting the target, and inside of target, I'm targeting a value because it's an object, right? Or you can say console.log type of event.target. If I do right here, target is an object, right? It's an object. Now, if I do target.value, value here, value is a string. So, and then if I do object of just event, what is the event? Event is an object, right? So an object inside of an object has a string, right? So an object inside of an object has a string, right? Right. That's how I'm targeting the onChange function. So here, once I have fired up that event, I need to expect something from it, right? So what should I expect? What should I expect? And this expectation should be equal to what, right? Currently, I'm giving it a value. That means it should be equal to it. If I give a value of React, it should be equal to React. Right? I should expect it to be equal to React, right? So this should be name input dot value, right? Dot value, because name input has value, right? I need to expect this, right? I don't need to expect. I can do target dot value, or I can do name input dot value, right? Name input dot value, right? Now, if I run this test, I'm going to run this test. Here, npm run test. I'm testing. So I have 3 tests. 2 of them passed and 3 of them passed. All of the all of the tests are passed. But now, if I maybe say Angular, I expect it to be Angular. Now I have a failed test. Now the test says I'm expecting React. I'm expecting Angular, but I received React, right? So this is how we like write unit test. Now for the same thing, like if you guys can try a fire event on, let's say, email input, right, which is also going to be an on-change event. Now it's going to be an email input, and then this is going to have again target because it's an object, and value has something called string. So if I want the email to be test@gmail.com, which is a string, I can write another expect function, and it is going to take an email input dot value, and I would expect it to be what do I expect? Test@gmail.com. Test@gmail.com. Right. So test is nothing more than just passing out passing out functions, grabbing those components, and then firing an event, and then expecting what do we expect and what do we receive. And if whatever we expected is the value that we received, that means we have successfully passed the test. That means it is rendering everything that we type, right? It is not rendering anything else. It is working as it is expected to work. Do you guys have any questions on this?
Yes, Nitish. Like previously fire event, we used the click event for the fire event, and there was just like one argument that we passed to it, which was the button name. This time, like let's say this is the first time that we are using the chains, fire event chains, because we found out that the event is on changed, and when we put the dot right after fire event, it gave us like the bunch of option, and we saw change, so we went with change, right? But how did you know that there were two parameters, and one of which was the object target, which we was supposed to be passed?
So this is basically, you can hover on it and say like, okay, it takes an element, which is an element, right? And it takes different options, but options is optional. You can pass an object or you cannot pass an object. If you give it as an ID and target it directly, if you target, for example, here, I'm targeting label, right? Which is one label ahead of input, right? I'm not directly targeting an input. If I have here data test ID, data, right? What was it? Data test ID, right? Yeah, data test ID. Data test ID, test ID. Then if I give it here as name change,
the ID
then
is,
I can
the I is smaller, I guess.
Right. Test ID. Now here I could have directly gotten that using name change equals to screen.get by test ID, right? Test ID.
Yes.
The ID was name change. Right. Now I can basically pass name change. And I don't need to pass. Do I need to pass name change? It's an element, right? Let's see what happens. I'm targeting that, but I'm not targeting the value, right? Yes, that's why it's failing. Yeah, I need to target the value, which is on an event. Target value. Yeah, it takes options. Some of these elements takes options. So whenever you see like syntax, it's going to tell you what it expects. Sometimes in this change, we need to pass, or we need to perform an action. On a click event, it was basically one click, right? There was no change. Here it was like, hey, go ahead and write this. We were performing an action on an event. Not just on an event directly, but inside of an event object. We had target, which is an object. Inside of an target, we had a value. So we are specifically targeting the value. That's why we are giving this. This is basically options. So this is like optional parameter. This is not required, but in our case, we need it because we are targeting an event, object event inside of an object to get the value, which is, for example, here, this is an event, right? So right now here we have target. Now the click event won't have so many nested data inside of an object. The click event is going to be just have like click, right? So we are targeting it just one time. But since the change object has multiple events, and in order to get that value, we need to go deep down that nested route. We give this target and value inside of an inside is an option. So in order to know that, you basically like look into syntax, right? It says it takes multiple options. Elements should be an element or a node or a document or a window, which means like DOM elements. These are DOM elements. And then options is like whenever we are making an on change, we are going, even whenever we are writing a form, we are going inside of an event. So we need to go inside of an event and write those, give those value that we expect to change. In terms of click, click is not an object, right? But it also accepts an options. It has multiple options. You can also pass other options here, right? You can pass other options. Options is going to be an object, right? It is going to be an object. That's why we are passing here an object test. We are passing this as an object, right? Option has to be an object. Inside of an object, we are targeting the target inside of an event, but the target also has something called value, which holds a string. And string is this value is the one thing that we are targeting on this change.
Gotcha. All right. Yes, this makes sense now.
If you guys have any other questions I am not sure if on this click event if we can pass anything else. But can we pass that? We have event target, right? We have event target. Let's see. Okay, we have render. No, these are just function. Yeah, few things requires us to go deep down the object tree. And then whenever we go deep down the object tree, we provide that as an option. If we don't provide this as an option, this name change is just going to get this event, but we don't know inside of this event, what are we targeting? What are we looking for? What is the change? See, the type isn't changed, right? This is the change. This is what we are targeting, but it doesn't know where to look inside of it. That's why we specify it as an object, because it takes option is an object because it's an object. So inside of it, we target and then value.
Hi, just can I show you something, like sharing my screen real quick?
Yeah.
All right. So sharing my screen. So I follow what you did, and I know you tried to console log it somewhere else. But before you did that, I tried to console log here in the sign up form test.js, and I tried to see what this input name input looks like, and it didn't actually give me anything. It gives like something like this.
Because see, that's an HTML element, right? It is capturing that from the DOM, right? And you are displaying in the terminal, right? You are displaying this DOM element on a node runtime, right? Which is in a terminal, right? It's running on runtime. That's why it's giving you, hey, it's an HTML label element. If you go up, it's gonna say it's a label element. HTML input element. Inside of an input element, you have a state node that says, hey, below type, it is a type of a label, right? Go down, it is an input. Input has, if you go down, it's a type of a label. Did you see the type of the label? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it's a label, and it has a state node of HTML label element. That means it is a child of a HTML label element. The input is inside of a label because it cannot display that element, right? Because we are grabbing that from DOM, right? You are grabbing that from the screen. So it's going to give you, hey, it's a type, it's a HTML input element. So
cool. All right, thank you.
Cool. Do you guys have any other questions? Otherwise, we can take a break. We can take a 10 minutes break and then we can continue afterwards. But like, if you guys have any other questions, feel free.
Can it be about anything?
Yes, anything. Okay, let's take let's take a break and then we can talk, right? We can talk during the break. That's fine. Nirusa? Nirusa, are you there?
Yeah, yes, Nitish. Yes.
Yeah. Let's put it on a break.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Who was that, Peter? It was you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I've just run into this situation several times. When I create an app, it starts with, I think, the root or the one of the main elements come out to like 600 and something by 0. So I don't see anything. Do you know what could be causing that?
Can you share the screen if that's possible?
I don't have any specific one at this point, but I've just seen sometimes you don't see anything, but when you inspect the elements, you see the size is something like 679 by 0.
I'm not sure, but like, are you get when you inspect it, do you get an div with an ID of root, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that means it's rendering the element. But after inside of that div, do you see any of your code that you did?
Yeah, the code sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. No.
That's weird. It would have been easier to look into it and debug.
Let me see if I can find something that I can show. Just give me some time, maybe after the break.
Yeah, take your time. Yeah. In the meantime, if any of you have any questions or if you want to chat, feel free. I just wanted to tell you, like, we don't write testing every day. We just write it whenever we write a main function. So like today, like my goal is not to like get you to write tests, right? Not to be proficient in writing test, but like be familiar, like whenever you go on a job, you see some like this test files and you look into the code and then you need to be familiar with it, right? Oh, like when you see it, you just need to know like what is it actually doing. So everywhere you go, like if it is a JavaScript code base, if it is a React code base, maybe Angular, Vue, anything that deals with JavaScript, you are going to see describe, it, expect, test, these kind of keywords. So like whenever you see that, you'll be like at least aware that, hey, like this means it's describing a test, and test, and it means it's describing a specific unit test. Expect means, hey, like what am I to expect at the end of it, and like similar things. Like other than that, like these are very common. It's basically you like even I use documentation all the time at work. So like don't hesitate if you even feel like, oh, I don't know anything. It's normal. I feel that every day at work. It's normal. So yeah. Cool. Hello, hello. Peter, did you find the issue? Anything?
No, sorry, I didn't find any.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whenever you find it next time, maybe like record the screen or something we can look into, so we can reproduce that issue and then we can figure out what's happening from there.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's see. Okay, do you guys have any questions regarding testing? It's pretty simple forward. Now, every time you write a test, this pattern will follow, right? It's not like you are writing something else. Whenever you are whenever you are making a component, it might be different, right? Sometimes you are making some different components, sometimes you are making something else. The code might change, it depends. But whenever you write test, the pattern will follow. Now, if we create another something, it is going to be, we are going to have a describe, we are going to have render, we are going to have it, and then we are going to grab those elements, and then we are going to fire some events, and then we are going to expect something from it. It is going to be it is literally going to be the same thing. So it's like a syntax. Like whenever you write a test, just you follow the same pattern. The only difference is what kind of functions you use that is provided by the library, right? Like get by label text, get by test ID, or like anything else, any other functions like that is provided. So those are the things that you're going to be using, but like just keep in mind, this is like general, this is like very basic introduction to testing. And this is every time you, for example, tomorrow you go ahead and get a job, you look into the code base, you are going to see the same thing. It might be like maybe 1,000 lines of code or anything else bigger, but it is going to follow the same pattern. It's going to, they are going to have describe, they're going to have multiple unit tests, and then each unit is going to test for something. For example, in this case, we are testing for name and email, but instead they might have one for name, one for email, one for password, or something like that. Do you guys want to do like one more example of it, or do you guys feel pretty like comfortable looking into like testing codes or like writing a simple test? What do you guys think? Do you guys want to look into one more example? Anyone?
One more example would be great. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So this, what can we do? Yeah, we can look into the click function. Let's do a model, right? You guys know what a model is, right? You guys know what a model is? A model is a component that whenever you click it, it performs something. For example, it shows you something, and then if you maybe you have a model, and then once you click it again, it can like disappear. For example, what is going to be an example of a model? I'll show you what a model is, but we'll write a very simple model. I'm going to show you simple illustration, but a model is something like this, right? So if you click this, it is going to display you something. Like click out, and it is going to close, right? So this is a model. We are going to make a very simple version of that, and we're going to test it, right? First, I'm going to write a simple model function and export it and that, and then I'm going to like model. Export model component model. Right. So we have a model, right? Going to close all this. Okay, let's come back to model, right? So let's see. For a model, we need, let's just create a very simple model that has a button. So whenever you click that button, it's going to show you some text. And then if you click another button, it's going to it is going to close that text, right? So pretty simple. Let's have a button, and this button is going to be open model, and then let's have another button that says close model. Okay. So let's have a state, and we want to keep track of if the model is open or if the model is closed. And then if it is open and if we click a button, we want to close it, right? So let's create a state for that, and let's have it as open and set is open. Initially, it's going to be not open, right? So false. Initially, it's not going to be open. So we have two buttons. So once we open it, we want to update this to true, and then if we click it, we want to update it to false, right? So click, on click, we want to do is callback function set is open, and we want to get true, right? Now we could have written the same thing like this, right? We could have written it like this, or we could directly write down click function, but it needs to be a arrow function so that we don't have so that there's no issue. If we do it directly, there is going to be some issue. It's not going to properly set it. It has to be an arrow function. If you do it directly, you need to bind it to this, or I think this dot two or something. This is basically ES6 feature that we need to give an arrow function for this. And whenever we click on the close button, we want to be able to set is open should be false, right? That is open should be false. Okay, we have this button and this button, but right now it does nothing. We have a button that, and then we have this state that keeps track of if our model is open or closed. So here I'm going to conditionally render a component, right? This is called conditional rendering in React. So if it is open and then I'm going to render that component if it is open. If it is open, we want a div, and let's say we want an h1 that says hello world, and let's say we have a paragraph, and let's say this is a paragraph, right? Now what happens is whenever I click a open model, it's going to say, hello world, this is a paragraph, and we have an option to close the model. Whenever I click it, it's going to close it, right? So that's pretty simple model, very simple, very basic. But we want to test it. We want to test that whenever we click a model, it's going to show us that model. And then whenever we are going to click the close model, it's going to disappear it from the screen. So click open model, appear on the screen, close model, disappear from the screen. We are going to write, in order to write a test function, what is the first thing we should do? Anyone? What do we need to write the test?
Model.
Import model?
Yes, yes. And then what is the first thing that you do when you write a test? Anyone? You describe
the component.
Right, you describe what the test is about, right? It is about model testing. and then it takes it has a callback function. Okay, now we can test. Now we can test. See, like syntax is similar, right? We are writing three different. The components are completely different. You have a counter component, you have a form component, you have a model component. All of this does very different thing, right? It is not even similar. It is an input, it is a button, it increases, like we write this is a form, but like if you see the test files, everything is using the same syntax, right? Everything is same, the pattern is same, right? So test, or like I prefer it, but it's the same thing. It says it's the name of a test. Opens and closes the model when the open and close buttons are clicked. You describe it, and then you have a callback function. Now, inside of a function, what is the first thing that we're going to do? Anyone just walk me through it? Like, what is the first thing that I'm going to do in order to test it?
Render the component.
Right. We need to render that component because we are testing that component, right? Okay, we are rendering that component. Once we render that component, what else? What is the next step we need to do in order to test the button?
Get the test ID, is it?
Yeah, we can
Or
get the
by
text
the
ID,
type?
right?
Mhm.
We can also get it by text, which is going to target the text inside of a button.
Mhm.
Or we can also, yeah, like test ID, we can target it by text, anything, right? So let's give it as like open button. And then we are going to, in order to target it, what do we need?
Screen.
Right, we need a screen, right? And the screen is going to be provided by this. We have render, we have screen. That screen is going to give us access to all of the methods, right? So right now, instead of test ID, we already did one by test ID. We already did one by label, but right now we also can do it by placeholder text in an input element, right? Because we have placeholder, so we can do that. By right now, I'm going to get by text, okay, by just text. Now what this does is it is an HTML element selector, right? And it has to match, right? It is a matcher. It has to match whatever is inside. That means here I'm going to grab this text. I want this by text. And on the screen, if it sees open model, it's going to grab that text, grab that element, right? Whatever has that text. So it is going to grab this button because it has this text that is matched, right? So now we are going to fire an event, right? So how do we fire an event? Anyone? We want to fire an event, right? Because we want to test. If we click this, we see this, right? So we want to fire an event, right? And what kind of event are we firing?
On click.
Yes, click, right? On click goes on click is like basically the, what do you call it? An attribute, yes, HTML attribute, but because on click is already reserved, we use click, right? Like on change, right? So, and what do we click? We click the button that we got, right? Which is going to be an open button. Open button. So now we have clicked. Now, what is the thing that we need once we have already performed an action?
Expect.
Yes, we need to expect something, right? Expect something to be something, right? Here, I'm going to expect to get by text. I can use these functions inside of expect as well. And what I want to get is if I'm taking open model, I'm expecting hello world, right? So I'm going to expect this by text. And I'm expecting this to be truthy, right? To be truthy means to be true, right? To be true, right? When you don't care when a value is, you just want to insert a value is true in a Boolean context. Is it there? Is it true? Like, am I getting hello world, right? Is this there when I click it? Yes or no, right? So that Boolean is to be truthy. To be truthy basically gives us, it gives us true or a false, right? There are basically 6 falsy values: false, 0, null, undefined, none, but everything else is truthy. So it checks if it gets the text, it is going to be true. So whatever we expected is shown, right? It is there. So let's check our let's see, we already have an error. It says get by text hello world to be truthy. Okay, expected a container to be an element, a document, or a document fragment, but got a string. Okay, what happened? Let's see. We have a render function. We got it by text, and then we are firing an open event, and then we expected to see hello world to be truthy. Yes, we have hello world. We have this is a paragraph. Let's see. File event.click, open button. It is expecting a container. Double to some more. Funnel test. Okay, what do we have? This form. 1 pass, 3 fails. Yeah. Let's see. 2. What functions do we have? To be called, to be, to expect this. Okay, maybe it's because we want a function, callback function. I think so. Yeah. So get by text, we are writing a function inside of an expect. So whenever we write a function, whenever we are testing, it always has to be a callback function. For example, we wrote a describe, we give it as a callback function. We wrote a it or test, we gave it as a callback function. Now we are again calling this function, we give it as a callback function. We expect a function to return a text called hello world. So that was the issue. I see. Yeah. So now the test has passed, because now if we open a model and in this context we have hello world, now here we say let's just get only hello. Do we get hello? 2 of 3 passed. Let's see. Yeah, hello, it is there. None. It is running form, it is running model. 0 of 3. Let's see. One more, run a test. 3 passed. 4 passed. Why did it pass? 1 second pass. Okay. Let's see. But it's always going to be true, right? When you don't care what a value is, it's always going to be true. Okay. Okay. Let's test for a close button, and then we are going to see like if it throws an error. How do we look for an error? Const close button. The same way we get in screen, get by text, and we want close model, right? Close model. And then after we have fired an open event, we want to fire a close event, right? We fired an open event, we expected it. Now we fire a close event, which is click, close button. And then now we expect the text, get by text, and then it's going to be, let's say hello world, but if it is not there, we want to throw, right? We want to throw error. So what does throw does is, it is used to test a function throws when it is called, right? So whenever I click close model, it is going to try to get that text, but it is going to throw because there's an error. Let's see. Let's see. It's basically passing. That's something. To only run fail test, no fail test. Okay, let's see. Computer that's what it's called. Yeah, so basically, I'm not sure what's, I think it's to be truthy is only looking for true. It is not looking for false. So it's always returning that true. And to throw is always, it is throwing an error whenever it is called. So it is going to be true, right? So by to throw, I mean, one of the example is, let's say we have a function, right, that says divide in B. So if, let's say, B equals to 0, then we want to like return, right? Usually we don't do that. We cannot divide if B is equals to 0, then we do throw new error, and we can throw like cannot divide by 0, right? This is like a proper way in order to write console, right? Console.log cannot divide. So this is basically, to throw is basically doing the same thing. It's basically throwing an error when you close a button, but right now it's throwing it and we are expecting it to throw. That's why the test is passing, even though the text is wrong. So do you guys have any questions? I know I shouldn't be using to be truthy. There might be some other method. Let's see. To be valid, to be visible. Yeah, we have to be visible. Expect that to be visible. We can do that. I think we can test that. We can test the screen. We are getting that closed model. We can get this. Let's say div data dash test ID data. We want it to be visible, right? So this get const data screen.get by test ID, and then test ID is going to be data, right? Data, right? Now here we can expect data to be visible, and here we can expect data to be disabled. to be, what do you call? What's the opposite of visible? To be undefined? No. To be empty? No.
Hidden?
Hidden? Do we have hidden? No. We have hidden. To be, to not be in the document. Do we have anything else? Let's see, to be disabled. I think we can do to be disabled, but I don't think it would work. But to be undefined. Let's see. Pass the test. Let's run the test. Run. Okay, we have a failed test. I'm going to expect. Okay, we got the test ID by data. There's an error. What is the error? Unable to find an element by test ID of data. Okay, let's see what happened. Test ID, test ID equals to, why is it unable to find it? Oh, I have this on iPhone. I think it can find it now. It's not finding by test ID. That's something. And it's because it's a content. And okay, let's see. Get by test ID. Get by test ID. We have data. We have add, and then we are firing an event. What do you guys think?
I think instead of checking by text, we should check the state value, because initially the div is not appearing, right? So we cannot check at the initial state.
Yes, but the thing is, we are only checking it after the event has been fired, correct?
Oh,
okay, I think one thing that makes sense is once it has been fired and then we have an ID, right? Right? There you go.
Yeah.
Right? Once we have it fired and then we have this ID, right? So before we had it before, now the event was fired, we don't have that ID, right? We don't have this, right? Because we are calling it initially, right? Before this. So now once we fire the event, and did you guys get it? Like what it's trying to do is it's looking for, it is looking for this H1, right? Data test ID, but it's initially we don't have that data or test ID, right? It's only after we click it, we have that div that has a test ID of data, right? So that's why initially, before we fire an event, we had that get screen by test ID. Now, after it fires an event, now it's visible and our test has been passed, right? So one thing, what did you guys just noticed is, you see like how it goes from step 1 to step 2, step 3, but it cannot go back. For example, it cannot, once we are calling this here, it cannot come and click and say like, hey, there's still data and I'm going to go and get it, right? So this is going to be like one-way data flow, right? It's coming all the way from down. That's why whenever we have here, whenever we fire an event of open button, and then we expected, and then we fire a close button, because when we open it, it's here, it's checking for the expect. When it's visible, now if we close it, which is happened by firing an event, now we have fired the close modal event. Now it should not be there, right? It should be undefined, or it shouldn't be there. I don't remember what is it called. It is not, it is defined, but received H1 test ID of hello world. We still have that. Okay, content. To not be visible, how would you do that? To be visible? To be visible? To be visible? To not be visible? No. Expect the content to not be visible. This would fail, right? Because it's not visible. Yeah, it's not visible. Because once we click open model, it's visible, it's passing that test. Now, if we close it, it's not visible, so it's failing the test. Let's see. Would be visible alternative for Jest. Do we have anything replacement for to be visible? Let's see. You see, they have a it, but now they have an async function, async callback function. Async always comes with a wait. Is unrelated. Okay. To be hidden. Be hidden. Do we have to be hidden? Testing. We will also be considered a hidden attribute. Should returns false if an element has an attribute hidden unless it is explicitly shown with style display. Or we can see to be visible is from React testing cheat sheet, right? To be visible. Let's see the stocks. Search docs, search to be visible. We don't expect to be value to be visible, to be falsely defined, less than truthy, undefined nan, to equal, to throw an error. Okay. So it doesn't have that function. Yeah. Yeah. So I think basically they don't have to be hidden. That's weird, but to be empty DOM element, could that be something near to be an empty? No. Yeah, it is something. I'll probably look into it and I'll figure it out. Yeah, and then I'll let you guys know like what is the alternative to be visible. They don't have anything like to be hidden or anything. To be, yeah, they don't have to be hidden or to be empty. Yeah, they don't have to be empty. It's deprecated. Yeah, deprecated. Test ID empty. Assert when an element has no content or not. Get test ID empty to be not dot to be empty. So can we do not dot to be visible? Right? There you go. Yeah. Boom. See, documentation is out there. Like you guys just need to go ahead, like look into documentation when you write test, and then get to know what you are going to use. Right now, like I didn't had any idea like instead what was the alternative to be visible. So instead of in JavaScript, we would basically write an exclamation, right? So if it is true, it would be false. If it is false, it would be true. But in Jest, I think this you give not before your function. So that is probably like it's going to be like to be visible is true. But if I give it not, it's going to be not true, right? Is it not true? And then it's going to pass the when I click that button, content should not be there, right? So it should not be visible. So that's how. Okay, cool. Do you guys have any questions, concern, anything that you didn't understand? Like, if you guys have any questions, feel free. But basically, whenever you look into, whenever you write code, you know what you want to expect. and then you give that value, right? What you expected. And then there is no way to like see things, right? Like for example, like this, right? No way to see things, but you have this terminal that says like, hey, I'm running a model to test or form the test. It is passing, but whenever it fails, it gives you, it gives you that information, right? Where is it failing? And that's how you identify like, hey, this is here. Like, for example, if it is failing, now you know like, hey, it's failing in model testing. Inside of model testing, there's an arrow which has a test that says open and close the model. And then I am actually failing on this specific expect statement where I'm expecting it to be visible, but it is not visible, right? So, and then I go back. Let's see. And then I go back and then I see like, hey, it's a model testing. This is my unit test and this is failing on this step. So what is going wrong, right? What is, if there is anything that's going wrong, it is going to act up, and then you are going to know which is, and then you are going to go ahead and fix that error. But like, if you guys have any questions, concerns on this, feel free to ask. I don't expect you to understand testing right away, but like, we just saw 3 different examples, and all of the examples followed the same thing, right? Describe, it, render, expect, screen. Like, it's the same thing. Testing is nothing more than that. Like, we describe what we are testing. We give information about our unit that we are testing, which is going to be it. And then we render the component because we are testing that component. So we need that component to be rendered. And then we grab any element, any HTML element that we are testing, and then we fire an event to that element. And then when we fire that element, we have basically some expectation what we want that element to do or like to be, and if the value changes or if it is going to be visible or if it is going to be hidden. And that's how we basically write testing, and that is what like testing is in React. And then Jest, it comes with inbuilt. Jest is just a library. It's more of a test runner. So whenever we write this is provided by Jest, right? But this screen, these are provided by testing library, right? Testing library. And then whatever the testing things that you see here, it's provided by Jest. So Jest is doing this for you. Like whenever you write test, whenever you test your test, so all of the information that it gives, everything is done by Jest. So Jest is basically a test runner, but a React library, testing library is what gives you all of those functions, right? Here I could, instead of using screen, I think this is also going to run because it's going to, I'm directly getting get by text from the library, right? I'm instead of screen, is it? Okay, it's not, it wants me to use screen doc. Okay, screen is an object which has a bunch of properties. So we are getting get by text from that screen property. Cool. Do you guys have any questions, concerns, anything? You guys, like, were you guys able to understand how to write a unit test?
Yes, we need to practice.
Yes, yes, you need to practice. Yes, because it's syntax, right? You see, like, we write this test, we wrote this test, we wrote another this test. You see, everything is same, right? Literally the same. The only thing that's changing is the component that you are grabbing, the component that is being rendered, and what events are you firing, and the expect, right? So those are the only things that's changing. Other than that, everything, you see that pattern, right? It's the same thing. Whenever we test a component, it's the same thing. Do you guys have any questions, concerns, anything else? anything
So,
like.
So these testings are only done which application has provided the virtual DOM?
So
Can
here,
we use testing on other normal like
yes,
applications
yes,
which do not provide virtual DOM?
yes. Testing is done like either you write JavaScript or either you write Python or anything. Like we have testing frameworks, right? For example, if you write a general, for example, you say you write a function sum a plus b. One of the common example is it returns, it takes a and b, but it returns a plus b, right? How do you test this? How do you test this using just JavaScript? Any idea? How would you test it? We would basically write another function, right? To test this, we would write maybe like test sum, and this test sum is going to call this sum function, and then we are going to give two value, and we expect this value to be equal to something, right? So for example, in JavaScript, we have, let's say, result one. On result one, we give them 1 and 2. We are basically calling that function. It's going to add, and it's going to store this result here. And then we can maybe say something like, what can we say? We can say assert dot strict equal. I think it's going to check. It's going to check the result of 1 with the value of 3, right? So this is like normal JavaScript, right? So what happens here is like you write a function to check another function, right? You have a function, and if you want to check this function, you write another function where you give the value and check when you compare the value, right? So that is the same thing that is happening here. It's nothing. It's basically another function that we are taking, and then we are firing an event on that function and then comparing it. Expect is like comparing, right? Comparing what we have with what we want to have, right? So like this, like equal, strict equal. It is also a function, right? It is going to check if result 1 is equal to 3, right? So if here is 10, this is going to be false, right? So this is going to be false because it's going to be sum is going to be 12. 12 is going to be stored in result 1. When you check result 1 with 3, that's false. So testing, like we can use a framework, we can write our own function to test it, like anything, like testing in basic JavaScript. Just to test this, we can write this function, and this is going to be testing, right? But here, in terms of React, in terms of component, when you talk about component tree, when you talk about React, we are using testing library that React provides. Instead of writing our own functions like this, we are using the function that React has already provided for us. And then we are just comparing those values with what we want that value to be, right? So like I expect like myself to like look into documentation whenever I write a test, right? Because like there are so many functions, and then every day they are like deprecating something, and then they are like coming up with new functions, and then it's getting updated. So if I want, I didn't know they didn't have to be hidden. Maybe like anyone can go ahead in Jest. Jest is an open source framework, right? And then create to be hidden, and then maybe push it out, and then if they approve it, it's going to be available on next release, right? So many people are working on it, like it's available for us. So instead of writing our own function, we are utilizing the function that already somebody else has written for us. I think yeah.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about that. When you said the fire event is accompanied by some event or whatever fire event, accompanied by a target, and it has
okay,
a value.
Yes, here.
Yeah, and expect also somewhere you put this target and a value.
Right here.
So, yeah, in order to understand the real concept, do you have any other easy examples so that?
So any fire event will have an on click. Any fire event will have an event, right? For example, right now we have a change in counter. We had a event of click, but this event, if we look into documentation, you see that click is it is targeting an element, right? So first thing that we need to provide for click is inside of a bracket. This is the syntax, right? So inside of a bracket, we need to provide an element, right? The element can be an element, node, document, or a window. So now what is a document? Document is anything that you see in a web page, right? So this is a document, right? That's why we call it DOM, right? Document object model, right? So that's a document. A window, it's also the same thing. We have window, right? So we are grabbing this button. That means we are grabbing it from the DOM. So that's why we are passing this here, right? Is an element because the button is an element, right? It is an HTML element, right? We are grabbing that by
button is a target or it's a value? It's not a value, right? It's a target.
It's a yes. We are
target,
using the data value to get the button. Button is an element.
Click is an event, and the button is a target where you hit it or click it.
Yes.
Or whatever even happens,
button is an element.
Whatever comes out after click, that's a value.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and it also can, this fire events can also take options, but it is optional. You can give them an option, or you don't need to give them an optional because it is optional. So whenever you see like you just saw click, you have element, and then you saw options, right? Options equals to empty object, right?
Okay.
1 second, click. Options is empty object, right? Whenever you see question mark, that means it is optional. You don't need to provide. Sometimes you have to provide. For example, whenever we are looking at a form, I will go ahead and console log the event. Okay, I have the event. So whenever we are looking at the form, so here, let's see. I'm going to write anything, and then I'm consoling log that I'm logging that event. So I'm going to look here. An event is an object, right? And whenever we provide an option is also an object, right? We give this option inside of an object. So we put an object. Now we are targeting a specific value in this object, right? So whenever we see this, whenever we open this event, we are already inside of an event because we are firing this event, right? So we are already inside of this event. Now in this object, we are targeting this target, and we are targeting this value. That's why we give this object has a target inside of a target. That's why I'm giving this, I'm mapping this inside of a target. We have a value, right? And we are manipulating, we are targeting that value. So I want the value to be this, right? I want the value to be this. Okay. And then when I get this value here, email input is an HTML element. You can also give this the target value, or you can directly jump to value. Now this is like whenever you are looking at an object, for example, const, let's say fruits. It's an object, and fruits have maybe there's a citrus, also an object. Citrus can have an orange, right?
Yeah.
Or it can also have a lemon, right? Now, if you want to target orange, let's say, if you want to target orange, you can either say fruits dot citrus dot orange, or if you are already inside of this object, you can say fruits.orange. Fruits.orange. Because inside of this, you can directly go here, or you can go like step by step because you are already inside of an object. This is the same thing here. You can either go event.name input. Name input is this name input. We are putting this here. It has a target, it has a value, or we can say it already has a value. We are already expecting the value for that name input, right? I'm using name change here, but like name change. I can directly target this value, or I can go inside of a target and I can go inside of a value. Okay. It is still going to be the same thing, but the general idea is what I felt was you were pretty confused on why we used this. This was because we are going inside of an object to get the value we needed. We already fired an event. Event has an object, but whenever we click an event, we directly get an object. But here we have like inside of onChange event, we have multiple objects, right? We have so many objects, but we need something that is on target. And then we also need the value which is inside of a target. So we are going from one object to another object inside, right? We're going inside. We want the value, but we are going through target, right?
Yeah. You know,
so if it,
out of 3 tests we performed, some of the expect have all these targets values, and the fire event also have, and some don't have. That's why I'm
yes, because
if it is a general format, then
so
why
it's
some of them have,
because right, it's because we need an element. It is compulsory because there is no question mark. You don't see, it's not optional, it is necessary. But this options is optional, right? You can provide an option if you need an options, or you don't need to provide an option if you don't need it. For example, on a click event, it's just a click event. We fired that event. We don't need to go anything anymore inside of that event. That's why, like whenever we click it, we just have this, but it also takes an object, right? We can also pass an object, right? We can pass an empty object. That's fine. We can just do it like this as well. This is optional. You want to provide it, okay? You don't want to provide it, okay? But in our case of onChange event, we need something called value, and that value is deeply nested inside of objects. So we are using options to get that value.
Okay. Just as optional, which makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah. And here also we can also have a function, right? We can also have callback functions here, right? So so like it's pretty much based on what do you prefer, what are you trying to achieve, and it's based on that. Like, what are you trying to achieve? It's based on that. For example, here, if we wanted to access, let's say on form, let's say if we wanted to instead of target, let's say we wanted to go with native events. Instead of target, we'd go to native events, right? Native events, and then we would target maybe data, but native events is inside of that object, right? Yeah, but we want target, and then inside of a target we have something called value, so we target that value. Yeah, it's mostly based on what are you trying to achieve, right?
Makes sense now. Okay.
Cool. Do you guys want me to upload this on GitHub so you can like look back and then go ahead and practice, maybe write some tests similar?
Yes, please.
Okay, got it. Okay, let me just create. No. Let's see. It at remote origin. It remote add origin push. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to send that in the group chat. Okay. Yeah, just go ahead and then make some very simple components. For example, like maybe what you can do is what you can do is like similar to counter. Maybe you can have something or a button that does something. For example, whenever you click a button, it needs to fire an event, or like or whenever you click a button, it needs to display something, and kind of write test for that, or something similar. Like there can be numerous, like various kind of examples, but like these three examples I think is more related to like kind of a real life experience, because like form, you are always going to deal with forms, right? You are always going to be building forms whenever you go to work. Like there is going to be form, you are going to have to work with forms, right? Whenever you are building on a website, you can have a contact us page, we are going to have form. Whenever you are building a website for a multinational companies or like at work, you're going to have to deal with forms. So to like testing for a form, like you can try like creating a different kind of form and then kind of testing that form model. You might, I think, yeah, you will encounter it when you work. There are different kind of models. How would you test it? And then counter is like the very basic example of how youth state works. This is like not the testing part, but this general part is like one of the most common interview questions, which is like, hey, I have this button. If I press it, I want to somebody's waiting. So this is like one of this code. They basically tell you, they basically give you a button and something to display, but they don't write the code or functions or state. And they tell you like, hey, if I press it, I want to increase it. If I press it, I want to decrease it. So like this is like very common technical interview question. Form, not so common. Like most people don't create a form, but like sometimes they do during an interview. Usually you won't be told to write a test case whenever you are interviewing. But they ask you, like whenever you are talking to them, they ask you, hey, like, do you write test for your components? Like whenever you are building a product, do you write test for it? Like, are you familiar with Jest, or are you familiar with Engine, or like how do you debug, or how do you test your code? Like that kind of questions is very like normal whenever you are interviewing.
Did you explain about the engine? What is it? So
Yeah, so
Jest?
yeah, so Jest, I told as I told you earlier, right? Enzyme is a library, right? Testing library. We have test runner, which is Jest and Mocha. Like some Mocha, like Mocha JS. So we have Mocha, which is also a framework that runs on Node.js, which we use to write tests, right? It is an alternative for Jest. Now, you can either use Mocha or Jest. And then on testing library, you can either use Enzyme or React testing library, right? And each and every one is compatible with one another, right? So you can use Jest and you can use Enzyme, Jest with Enzyme. Or right now we use React testing library with Jest, right? So this is the most recommended and common Jest and React testing library, because React supports Jest whenever you create an app, right? It supports inbuilt, right? It comes right out of the box. That's why like even I use Jest and React testing library at work. I haven't used Mocha, but like I think it's going to be similar. We can look into some examples. Let's see an example. See, like this is Mocha, right? Whenever you write Mocha, you describe, and then this is a callback function, right? I used an arrow function, but this is a callback function. So it's again describing function it, and then a callback function, and inside it's writing its logic. And then in the terminal, it's again the same thing, right? So either you use Mocha or Jest, you will see these common words, right? Common way to write test, right? Like even if you use Jest, you'll see a describe, you'll have a callback function, you'll write it, you'll have a callback function, and then you'll write a code, right? Testing code. So it's the same thing. Either you use Mocha or Jest. So once you're familiar with Jest or Mocha, anyone, you'll be comfortable working with. Like even if you have a code base, they are using Mocha, you look into that code base and you'll be able to understand what's happening. So Enzyme is okay. Enzyme is a testing utility for React. So we use React testing library. React testing. We used something called React testing library. So React recommends Jest and React testing library. So that's the one that we used. Or we could use Enzyme with Jest instead of React testing library. But the only difference would be the functions, right? For example, let's look into one of the example. Let's look into 16. Yes, 5 Enzyme guides. React. It does with React Native. Enzyme with Jest. Let's see example. Test. Let's see. Let's see how this guy is putting it on test folder. So it's personal preference. So if you see here, we used functions like render from. Let's look at side by side, right? Let's look into this and this. So we use functions like render, file event, screen from testing library, right? React testing library. But now here, if we are using Enzyme, we have our own function called mount, shallow, render. So shallow is also rendering their component. Is mounting, and shallow rendering. It's again rendering. So like should mount in a full DOM, should render to static HTML. So the only difference is the functions, right? So you are going to use these functions whenever you use React testing library. You are going to use these functions whenever you are going to use Enzyme. So that's the only difference. Now, if you see, this guy is writing in Enzyme, right? It has describe, it, expect to be, right? It's the same thing. The only thing is just Enzyme provides you with different functions than React testing library. So you just have to look into documentation. But again, Jest and React testing library is the recommended one, and like I also use that at work. So like in like talking from experience, mostly if your code base is going to be a React, if you are going to be hired as a React developer, they are going to use Jest and React testing library.
Thank you.
Do you guys have any other questions, any concerns, anything? Doesn't have to be code related, anything, feel free. I sent the link to the group. Just practice. So Jest was developed by Facebook, and React is also developed by Facebook. So that's why Jest is already supported by React. So as a React developer, most people just use Jest. Yeah. I'll also share this cheat sheet for React testing library that has all of the functions that you need. So whenever you are writing test, you can like look into this documentation. You can look into fire events that triggers DOM elements, right? Fire events takes node and an event, or for example, fire event.click, the one that we used. And you can basically go on from there. Like you have some of the examples here, how they used it. Yeah, I'll send that over, send the link on the group. Yeah. And this doesn't like this, when we learn this doesn't mean it's only for React. It's for like anything. Either you go into Vue or like React Native or Angular. Even if you go into Angular, it's going to be pretty similar, right? So if you describe, test, again, this is in Angular, right? Describe, test, callback function, expect to be, right? So this is going to be the same thing. Testing is going to be same regardless of either you're going to do it in React, Angular, Vue, or anything else. Unless it is web related, either it is Jest or it is Mocha. This is the format that it is going to follow. Cool. Do you guys have any questions, concerns, anything? No. Cool. I think we can end the session here, right? I think it's time. But basically, guys, go ahead, try some tests, make some simple components. Doesn't have to be complex. And then write some unit test. Practice. You'll get to it. Like it's not easy. It's not hard either, because like it's just syntax. So when you practice, you'll get to it. Whenever you look into any code base, you see a test file, you won't be scared. So
Great. Thank you, Nilesh.
And also, if you have any React question, React related, anything that you don't understand, just feel free. Nirusa, I think we can end this session, right?
Yes,
Yeah, it's time
Nitish,
to
you
go to
can.
bed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm just asking whether
Yeah,
we're
go ahead.
closing. Yeah, no, I'm just not asking anything.
Okay.
I'm just ready to close.
Okay, that's fine. All right, thank you guys. Practice. If you don't know anything, feel free to ping me, send me a message on Teams. I'll be happy to help. I'm always on my decks, morning to evening. So cool. You guys have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Nitish. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.